It's really not the weapons that are dangerous. It's the people you have to worry about.
Welcome to Heartland Arms, where skill, safety, and training all come together. I'm Michael, and today we're going to go over double action versus single action. Now, this is probably where people have a lot of hard time understanding the differences between some of these firearms. So, let's go to the board, because this board has a lot. This is the most we've had. These are all real firearms. There is no ammo here. We are all unloaded. We double check everything that's unloaded. Everything is unloaded. So we have kind of this is the most firearms we've had on the show so far. So understanding the differences. You've probably seen these terms used with both pistols and revolvers, and we do have pistols and revolvers here, okay? But sometimes you don't understand what they mean. So before we get too far into this, we're going to actually define what an action is. So what is an action? So an action refers to how the firearm operates mechanically, okay? The difference on how the trigger interacts with the hammer or the firing pin to fire a round. So single action and double action describes how much work the trigger is doing when you press it, okay? So we're going to start with single action, okay? Single action firearms means that when you pull the trigger, it only performs one action, okay? One action means it releases the hammer or the striker to fire the gun. And then the gun or the hammer must be manually cocked either by hand, like a revolver, or by the slide cycling back, as with many semi-automatics, okay? So, an example here would be, this is a 1911, okay? In order to fire this, you must cock the hammer manually or rack it to get that hammer to go back, okay? And then you have classic cowboy style 6-shooters. So this is a 22. I like a little 22 single action revolver. You have to pull the hammer back before each shot. So let's go up off the table. So 1911. It's unloaded. Magazine's not even in it. So see, no magazine. When I cock this back, you see that hammer? There's the hammer. Okay. Can we go a little closer here? There we go. There's the hammer. So we're cocked, and this is single action. So when I pull the trigger, that hammer is going to drop. So you ready? There it goes. That would fire the firearm if there was in there. What happens is this, when that bullet gets fired down there, that energy is going to kick this back, and it resets the hammer, ready to fire. All the trigger is doing is dropping that hammer, okay? There's a big difference there. Now, one of the things I love the 1911, but I always am nervous when I'm dropping that hammer, and if I'm carrying it loaded, I don't like carrying this loaded just because in order to get this, I can't pull that trigger. That trigger, now that hammer's down, that trigger isn't going to cycle that hammer or anything. I have to manually cock that back, and if I have a round in the chamber, the good news is there is a safety here that when I have that safety on, if I pull the trigger, it's not going to drop that hammer, okay? So that's what that happened. If I take that safety off, I can't pull that trigger because it has an additional safety. Remember, we talked about safeties on firearms. I have to depress this and pull the trigger to drop that hammer. So it's very safe, but if I cock that hammer, I kicked on the safety. It doesn't matter. I can't. That firearm is not going to fire. The safety is engaged. That's what's happening. When I disengage, I can fire it, as long as I trigger the other safeties in there. Okay? That's kind of what I like about that. Now, with the revolver, single action revolver, I have to cock that hammer. Now, again, if I want to put the hammer down, I have to kind of pull the trigger to hold the hammer so it drops. And then I could rotate this because this has a loading port here. So let's go overhead. So I'm going to go over here to the white spot here. So see this little thing right here? This is my ejector port. So what I can do is I could pull the hammer back and it will rotate it so I can load this firearm. And then once it's loaded, I close that little port there, and then I pull back the hammer, pull the trigger. Now this also has a safety as well, that would help as well. Now the safety on this revolver is different, okay? In the 1911, if I put the safety on, the hammer doesn't drop. If I put the safety on here, the hammer will still drop, but what that safety does is it stops the firing pin from going through and connecting with the rounds. So it's still safe, but understand that there's a different mechanic depending on what firearm you're using and depending on the type of safety that you're using. Each firearm is unique, okay? So when we get into double action, okay, so that's going to be the top here, okay? There's a big difference. So single action, generally when you're pulling the trigger, they're very light and crisp. They're very easy, but you have to manually cock them, unless it's reset by the slide like the 1911 is. In double action, generally the trigger pulling performs two action. It cocks the hammer, then releases it to fire the round, and you don't have to cock the hammer manually. You just pull the trigger. So, here's this. Let's go front camera. There we go. So, we're still unloaded. And if you watch, when I pull the trigger, hammer goes back. That's one action. When the hammer gets to the end, it performs a second action, dropping the hammer and release and shooting. So you see how it's doing everything with the trigger. The trigger is causing everything to go. Same thing with here. This pulling the trigger is going to cause everything to happen. No manual intervention there, okay? So double action, you pull the trigger, it performs two action. It cocks the hammer and releases it. Nothing you need to do. Now, you have double action revolvers, which we just showed. You simply pull the trigger to fire. Double action, single action revolvers. Now, there are these. Now, generally, it could be where the first shot is double action, and then follow-up shots are going to be reset by the hammer. So, technically, the 1911 is going to be a double action, or the 19 is a single action. But sometimes you could have it where you pull the trigger and it's going to, the first round is going to pull the start the shot, and then follow-ups are going to be a lot easier on that hammer, okay? Double action triggers are longer and heavier, which can act as a built-in safety feature as well, especially when you're self-defense. Pulling the trigger on this and pulling the trigger on this. Let's go to the overhead. I'm going to show you while it's down here. If you notice, I'm going to try and do this Western style. Let's go to the front here. Okay. Yeah. Yep, right here. Okay. I'm going to pull the triggers at the same time. Ready? This one didn't even, I'm not even pulling the trigger all the way. This one's already gone. That's the difference, okay? So when you're going through, go back to the front. When you're going through, I wasn't even, by the time I even put pressure on this, on the trigger for the double action, the single action had already shot. So that's, you got to understand, understanding your firearm and the trigger is going to make a huge difference when it goes there, okay? Keep that in mind. Some firearms offer both types, okay? The first shot is fired double action, and after that, the slide moves back and cocks that hammer back. And the single action is, for the follow-up shots, are a lot quicker. So you have to understand what you're dealing with. Let's go to the overhead again. So I'm telling you, you have to understand that when your first shot, it might feel heavier. The second shot might be lighter. Now, some of the examples from a double action to single action is going to be a Beretta 92, a Sig Sauer P226. Those are, and they have others. Those are just kind of some of the examples that they're going to go from double action to single action. So if you're going to get one of those firearms, I would really suggest you train and understand having a trigger pull from a double action to a single action, because if you think that second trigger pull is going to be heavy and it's not, you can accidentally fire the weapon, and I don't want to see actions like that happen, okay? Now, knowing the difference helps you choose the right firearm for your needs, okay? It also helps you train with what you need to do, and understanding your trigger fill and those safety features are key, okay? So anytime you're dealing with this, understanding how the firearm operates, each firearm has a different trigger pull. And that means I could have this model and it has one trigger pull, and I could have one that looks almost identical to this, but it has a different trigger pull. Understanding how that works, and sometimes, and I'm going to eject that, sometimes when you're pulling it, you have to understand how that feels, okay? There's a sweet spot that you can get through that will make that feel different. Understanding that. Now, of course, when I grabbed this, I grabbed my wife. This right here, if you notice on the previous versions, I didn't have this. This is an aftermarket grip that you can get. My wife likes the feel for this. It helped her hold it a little bit better. I generally will get a black one. They make them purple. You could kind of tailor them to what you like and what you want there. Single action, just remember, they have a lighter, very crisp trigger pull, okay? Double actions normally have a really long trigger pull, and then but you have to understand and understand when it's going to go off. Double action, single action kind of gives you a blend, but you have to understand what you're getting into when you're doing that. So it's important to understand when the firearm is going to go off, how to operate it. If you have any questions, I always try. There's a lot of indoor ranges that say, yeah, we could try it. You could try different weapons. You could try different things and understand what you're getting into. Also, when you're going through that, look at the reviews for the firearm. When you're looking at a different firearm, say, hey, what are they saying? Are they liking the trigger pull? Do they like, a lot of people will tell you, hey, that's a, and they talk about poundage for a trigger pull too. And they'll tell you, oh, yeah, that's an easy trigger pull, or that's a hard trigger pull, or that's kind of it kind of jerks a little bit. Understanding what you're used to and what you're liking, each person's a little different, and you could modify them down the road too. So there's trigger kits that you can get that could kind of change those trigger pulls too. So if you find a firearm that you like, See if they have an adaptation. Say, hey, I like that firearm, but I just don't like the trigger pull. Do they make an aftermarket part that you could go to a licensed gunsmith to have corrected or changed to your liking? Always double check that. So always keep in mind, look at all aspects when you're trying to figure out what firearm you want to go through. So understanding your key parts, your safety, all of that is very, very important. So make sure you like and subscribe us on all our YouTube channels, Rumble. We're on all social medias. Like, follow, subscribe. The more followers we get, the better the algorithm likes us. But always, no matter what your experience is, keep learning, stay safe, and always be ready. And until the next show, we'll see you then.